That rooster's my first clock of the day, and he's dead reliable. 2, 3 hours before any sun shows itself, he starts up and gets louder and more frequent the closer daylight gets. My second clock's a scratch cut into my windowsill, and it's never once missed noon by more than a few minutes in the 2 years I've kept it. No clock in this house, no watch on my wrist, not one gear turning anywhere on this claim. If I get that scratch wrong 2 days running, bread doesn't rise on time, and the men come in from the field to a cold table. Hi, I'm Annie. I had a little brass clock once, my mother's, that rode the whole way west tucked in a trunk. For most of this country's history, a clock like that was a rich family's thing, made by hand, costing a working man the better part of a month's wages. And my mother had kept hers her whole life like the treasure it was. It was only these last few years that the factory started turning them out cheaper, enough that an ordinary family might actually own one. And hers had come to me right at that turn. When the oxen started failing on the far side of the plate, we lightened every wagon in the company, and that clock went out onto the trail with half our good dishes and a chair I loved. I still think of it sometimes, sitting out there in the grass along that river, keeping perfect time for absolutely nobody. So out here, I don't have a single ticking thing left to my name. What I've got instead works just fine, thank you, and I'll show you exactly how. That rooster is not just making noise to hear himself either. That crowing runs off his own body's clock, same as anything else alive, starting up reliable as anything hours before the sun's thought about rising, and building louder and more frequent the closer daylight actually gets. I've learned his rhythm well enough by now that I can tell near enough how long I've got before I need to be up and moving, all from a bird who's never once seen the inside of a clock. Some mornings, he's my only company for the better part of an hour, crowing away out there while I get the fire going. And I've come to find it almost companionable. Once I'm up, the next clock's the one I made myself. That scratch in the windowsill, cut right where the shadow of a nailhead lands when the sun's at its very highest. Cutting that first mark took me the better part of a whole day. Watching the shadow creep across the sill, waiting for the exact moment it stopped moving one way and started moving the other, and marking it right then with my knife before I could second guess myself. Forenoon, that shadow's still crawling towards my mark. Afternoon, it's already past it. There's a catch to it, though. The sun doesn't sit at the same height in December that it does in July, so a mark cut for summer runs false come winter. I keep 2 marks on that sill, one for each half of the year, and I know exactly which one to trust depending on the season. I've got help planning around all that too. My almanac tells me, printed right there in black and white months ahead of time, roughly when the sun's going to rise and set on any given day this whole year. Almanacs have been common enough in this country for near 70 years now. Someone years from now will put it about as well as anybody ever could. A family out here kept 2 books, the Bible to get them to the next world, and the almanac to get them through this one. Mine doesn't replace the windowsill or the sky. It just lets me plan a week ahead instead of only ever reading the day I'm standing in. Now, that windowsill only does me any good while I'm standing in this cabin, and plenty of my day happens well away from it. Out working the garden or down at the creek, I've got a couple of tricks that travel with me. Stand up straight and look at your own shadow. When it stretches out roughly as long as you are tall, that's your mid morning or your mid afternoon. Close enough either way. And I've caught myself doing it without even thinking, just glancing down at my own feet to know how much of the day is left. And if I'm out longer than that and need something sharper, I'll drive a stick straight into the ground and watch where its shadow falls through the day. The shortest shadow that stick's ever casts, right when it's barely a stub at its own base. That's the moment the sun's directly overhead and the shadow's got nowhere left to shrink to. High noon. None of that does me a lick of good, though, if I need to reach somebody who isn't standing right next to me. That's what the bell's for. Mine's cast iron, better than a foot across, hung up on a post outside the door, and rung the right way. It carries clean across this whole claim and on to the next one besides. You'd be surprised how far a good bell travels on a still morning. I've had a neighbor tell me she heard mine clear from her own kitchen door, near a mile off, and knew instantly which meal I was calling for. One ring pattern means dinner's on. A different one means come quick, something's wrong.
Run! It's an emergency!
It's not telling anybody the exact hour, it's telling them the moment, which out here matters a good deal more, and there's real comfort in knowing that if something ever did go badly wrong on this claim, while I was alone with the children, that bell would carry the word of it a mile off before I could ever run that far myself. Once the sun's down, I've got one clock left, and it's the best one I own. Find the Big Dipper, and the last two stars in its bowl point you straight to the North Star, same as they always have. That whole dipper wheels around the North Star once every day, slow and steady, same direction every single night. Imagine a line drawn from the North Star straight out through those two pointer stars, like the hand of a clock. Except this hand only moves backward, counter to the way you'd expect, about 1 degree every 4 minutes. Track where that line's pointing on a given night, and you can read the hour off the sky itself. Same as if somebody's hung a clock face up there just for you. I'm hardly the first to think of it either. Sailors have carried a little brass instrument for centuries, 2 turning discs and a pointer, built just to do this same trick, more exactly than my own eye ever could, sighting the North Star through the middle and reading the hour straight off a dial. I've never held one myself, but knowing a whole instrument was built just to do what I do standing in my own yard gives me a bit more confidence in it. The first winter out here, I checked myself against the sky every clear night I could, comparing what I read against what I already knew by the fire dying down or a child stirring, and it never once let me down. So that's my system: rooster and windowsill, almanac and shadow, bell and sky. Between all 6, I know when to start the bread, when to expect the men in from the field, and when it's late enough that the children ought to already be asleep. Here's what nobody out here quite understood, though, until it landed on us anyway. My noon isn't the same noon as the next town over. Not exactly. And it never was. Before the railroads got involved, this whole country ran on a patchwork of local times, 144 of them. Every town keeping its own noon by its own sun. When it's solar noon in Chicago, it's only 11:48 in Dubuque, not 50 miles as the crow flies from where I'm standing right now. My scratch in the windowsill was never wrong. It just was never trying to agree with Dubuque's or Chicago's, or anybody's really, but my own. It was the trains that couldn't live with that. A railroad running trains through a dozen towns, each one keeping its own private noon, is a railroad running blind. And by 1883, that finally caught up with them badly enough that the companies themselves sat down and carved this whole country into 4 standard zones, all in a single afternoon, without asking one soul out here whether we minded. It wouldn't even become the law of the land for another 35 years after that. Between the railroad reaching further every year and a wire strung pole to pole carrying the exact hour along with it, the whole way of reading the sun for yourself is quietly going out of fashion, town by town. Out here, though, my windowsill hasn't noticed the difference yet. It's still keeping the exact same time it always has.